Hello, and thank you for joining today here at the Bramble Patch. My name is Wendy, and I'm technical today. We've got Alicia. It's a beautiful day outside, so we do have the windows open, so you may hear the birds singing, but we are actually inside the office. Today, we're going to be looking at how to do a disappearing four patch. We've had a lot of feedback. People have been emailing, phoning, saying how much they're enjoying the tutorials, and they're particularly enjoying some of the disappearing blocks. I particularly like the disappearing four patch. You can do it any size you want to. I've made a little cushion up just to demonstrate this is the actual block itself. So I've actually liked them quite delicate. So if I hold it up, you can actually see that cushion. And this can be incorporated into a full quilt. It could be a border. It could be cornerstones. And there's different layouts as well to give you a different finish. So that's just a little cushion that I made. And when I say you can actually do different sizes, I actually want my block to finish up today 8 inches. So I'll be using 5-inch squares. So this is the little block I'm going to be using today. But just to demonstrate that you can actually make this block in any size you want to. And I do like them to be quite delicate. I think they look really quite stunning. However, my daughter Claire, she does like doing very miniature blocks. So I've borrowed a couple of hers just to show you how they can work out. Now you can see these are not hand pieced. These are pieced on the sewing machine. So they're quite tiny, and she has done quite a few. In fact, she's done a lot more than this, as you can see. And she's got one here that she's actually joined together. So you've got 4 little blocks there. And believe it or not, Claire is actually making a queen size quilt using these blocks. I do like them small, I do like them delicate, and they look stunning, but I won't be making them that size, I'm afraid. So well done to you, Claire. And it'd be lovely to see that quilt when it's actually finished. So again, you can use your bits and bobs up doing this particular technique. So let's take a look and see what we actually need to make one block. Here we go. So first of all, thank you, Alicia. You can use 4 different fabrics. You can use 2 fabrics. I like to use 3 fabrics. So first of all, I've got 1 square, which is 5 inches by 5 inches. Then I've got a fabric that actually blends really quite nicely. And that one is another 5 by 5. All the squares are 5 by 5 inches. And then 2 background fabrics. And they're both 5-inch squares. Sorry, 1 background fabric cutting 2 squares. So 4 squares in total. So that's what you need to make the block. I've got a few different fabrics here that I've just managed to cut out. So first of all, we're going to lay the first block. I'm just trying to position this so you can see it nicely. And I'm going to lay a background fabric next to it. I've got white on white. Then I'm going to do them opposite. So my other white on white will be diagonally, and then my other fabric diagonal to the first one. So I've got 3 different fabrics. This is going to be the construction. So all we need to do to start with is sew this one to this one and this one to this one. So I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So all we need to do is just roll this fabric on top of here, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch just down this seam. Okay. So just pop that in there. I'm just sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance on that one. And I'll just roll this over and do exactly the same to this one. Put those together. And I'll just run that straight onto it because that's going to save me a little bit of thread. And I've just got a little thread saver that I'm just going to machine onto so that when we start again, you don't get all that nesting and waste a lot of thread. So if I just open these up, you can see that we have them like so. So what we want to do now is we need to press the seam allowance to the darker fabric. So the seam allowance on this one will go this way, and on this one will go in the opposite direction. And the reason we're doing that is so that when we actually sew the center seam together, they are going to just nest nicely, and it's going to eliminate any bulk. We press into the dark side so we don't see the seams through the lighter fabric. So all we're going to do now, I'm going to roll this one over, and I'm just going to nest these two seams together here. I'm just going to try and hold that so that you can see if I open that up, they actually sit next to each other. Obviously, if you prefer to pin, then that's what you need to be doing. Whatever is the most comfortable thing for you to be working with. So I will just pop that under the foot of the sewing machine and we'll sew straight the way down there. And as I approach that seam, I'm just going to make sure that they are nestled. I can feel the seams together, so they're not sitting on top of each other or they're 1/2 inch away from each other. And I just sew onto my scrap of fabric, which is my thread saver, or we call it a donkey because a donkey is carrying our thread for us. So if we open this up, we can see that we've got a really nice join there. And it's good to try and get that as precise as you can because your eye tends to be drawn to it. So you can press the seams one way or you can press them open. If you press them open, it means you can't stitch in the ditch through that line because you would only be sewing through thread. If you press them to one side, then you can stitch in the ditch because you're sewing through fabric. I will actually press these seams open today, just so that you can see the process of how that's going to work. So I'll just move the eye a little bit. So I'm just going to open that seam up to start with, and I'm just going to encourage it to sit nice and flat. And I'm pressing it in the orientation of the seam. I'm not wiggling my iron about because what I don't want to do is stretch the fabric. So as you can see, we've got the seam pressed open. What we need to do now is take the block back to the cutting board. If you have a rotating cutting mat, this is a good one to use for, because what we don't want to do is start to cut the block and then move the block. Once it's cut, we are not moving the fabric. So I'll take my ruler. Now, as I said before, I like this to be delicate. So I'm only going to cut this strip 1 inch. If you're more comfortable cutting it wider, then please do so. There's no rules and regulations. This is just my preferred way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to situate the black line, which is my 1 inch line, on my vertical sewn line, like so. And as I do that, so I've got the 1 inch line on my vertical, and I'm going to slide it up to make sure that I've got, it doesn't matter what line, but a line sitting horizontally. So I know I haven't got anything twisted around there, like so. Make sure you're holding it nice and firm and cut. At this point, do not move your fabric. You're going to move your ruler, and I tend to put my fingers on here and lift this top piece away. Once again, now I'm going to situate that 1 inch line on the horizontal sewn seam. And as I do that, I'm going to situate the vertical, one of the vertical lines on there to make sure that it's all nice and straight, like so. And cut. This is where now, if you have a rotating cutting mat, you can do it. Or if you're working on the edge of a table, you just step down around to the side. I've decided to do it this way because I don't want people to feel they can't use their ordinary cutting board. So I've just rotated that through 180 degrees. And now I'm going to do exactly the same again. Situate the 1 inch line on my vertical. And I'm just double checking to make sure I've got that on a horizontal. And lift, and 1 inch line on my horizontal here, double checking that vertical. So, and push. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this around just so it's in the original orientation that you saw it. So what I like to do now is I just like to gently pull away the 4 squares. And all we're going to do now is we're going to rotate these to start with. So these 4 here, so the north, south, east and west, we're going to turn it through 180 degrees and 180. Sound like a dart player. 180. Turn those around. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the same one. I'm going to the little square in the center. I'm also rotating that one. So that now, if I was just to nudge these fabrics back together, what we're looking for, the aim of this, is to have your colored square and you have the same fabric surrounding it with the white in the middle. Likewise, I've got the green and I've got this going here. And obviously that now has a knock-on effect to the white because it does exactly the same. So I think that is really neat. So what we need to do now is just separate those up again. And we're going to sew these together in 3 rows. So this row, this one, and this one. So all I need to do now is just to roll this over, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch here. So you're always sewing your background fabric to the main fabric. If you're doing that, you know you've got everything correct. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to sew that down. And I'll sew these just a row at a time. If I'm doing this at home, I actually speed piece and I just do them all at the same time and go back. But I don't want to confuse you. So I'd rather do it this way whilst we're on film. Because then if you want to refer to it, it's much easier for you to see the layout and how it's been achieved. Just make that off. And if I take this back, oh, don't want that one there. If I take this back, I'm now going to sew the white one to the coloured one. So take that over. Like so. Once you get into a rhythm with these, it goes together really, really quickly. I particularly like these in a sampler block because there's so much you can do with them. or even if you've got fabrics left over to do as well. So that's the first row. So now what we're going to do, we're actually going to sew these together. And this is an occasion where I do pin. I always pin this part of it, just for my own peace of mind. So if you can see these 2 blocks here, I'm going to roll it over. And once again, like I said, you've got background to colour. And I'm going to pin. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to paste the pin approximately 1/4 inch down from the seam here. So there's the edge, and I'm just going to eyeball about 1/4 inch. I'm actually going in to the seam. So that's in the sewn seam, okay? And I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. So I'm going into the seam. Now, if you just maneuver that and straighten it up, what you can do then is go into the seam allowance on this side and then out on the other side. Now, if I come out and it's not directly on that seam allowance, I just withdraw the pin and put it back in, because then it means that the fabric isn't twisted or skewed. So therefore, those seams are sitting on top of each other. So now when we sew them across, they should actually butt up to each other because I've got these seams pressed open. Now I do this, whether I've done it, pressed the seams to one side or whether I've pressed the seams open, I still pin the same way. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to raise the foot and I'm going to put it down and I'm going to start sewing. Now, as I approach where the pin is, I've got the needle in line with the pin. So I'm going to remove the pin by pulling it out at a 90-degree angle. Don't twist it, otherwise you're going to twist that fabric again. So just ease that out and just keep sewing. And I'll sew onto the little donkey. And then I can just remove that. And I'm hoping the camera will pick this up. So this is the seam we've just sewn, and this is the finish you get by pinning it like that. Got quite a nice little join there. And it doesn't matter, I use this technique anytime I'm pinning seams together that I want a good cross section. I always use this method. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to roll this one over, and as before, I've got the coloured fabric against the white and the same on the bottom. So once again, I will take a pin, I will put that into the seam approximately 1/4 inch down, like so, into the seam approximately 1/4 inch down on my second piece of fabric, push it through, into the seam, and out on the other seam, and that's come out spot on. So that just shows you how they are laying in sync with each other. So I'll just take that quickly to the sewing machine. Lift, just raise the foot, just to make sure that's sitting up there and it's not going to start bunching up or anything. And, you know, to do this, it doesn't matter what type of machine you've got. It doesn't matter whether, you know, it's a small lightweight or whether it's one of the really big ones that, you know, have got lots and lots of things they get up to. You can still achieve this particular finish by just taking that little bit of care with the pinning. So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to just sew these ones together as well. There we go. Just using that 1/4 inch again. I've got a 1/4 inch foot on my sewing machine today. and I'm going to sew the green one to the white. Obviously, whilst I'm doing this tutorial today, I'm obviously stopping and explaining and talking you through the process. When you're doing this on your own, once you've done your first one, you will realise how good they go together. Okay, so what we need to do now, we need to once again press these seams though, so they're going to go nicely together. So because this is a very small area and you've got bulk, we need these seams to go out to the side because it's going to spread out that bulk and make things sit much flatter. Like so. So because these are going out, both the top one and the bottom one need to go in. So just give that a little press. And once again, I'm trying to press it in that orientation to make sure that we're not doing any stretching. Just so it's curled itself out, so I'll just give it another little press. There we go. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pin exactly the same way. So on this occasion, I will pin this seam first and then the two side seams using the same technique as I've showed you before. So on this occasion, we've got the seams going nesting, but I'm still going to pin. 1, 2. And by doing the centre one, it just makes sure that everything else is leveling up quite nicely. And approximately 1/4 inch down into that seam. Into the seam. And that one as well. And the last pin. In the seam. And all the seams are going in the opposite direction to each other. So it's really very, very easy to pin because they just nest. And in actual fact, you know, apart from doing the size that Claire's doing, the bigger you go, the easier it is to pin. So, you know, if you want to do one, you might want to take, instead of doing that first cut that I did away from the centre seam, I do it 1 inch. You might want to try it at 1 1/4, 1 1.5 inches, just to make things a little bit more comfortable for you. I have seen people actually do these using 10-inch squares. And actually, they look completely different purely because of the size. I'm just going to lift that up so I can ease that out. So I've got flower-headed pins today. There we go, just put that little thread saver through there. And once again, you can see that we've got a nice little join going. Okay. Now this seam is going to be pressed away. So you can either wait until you've pressed the bottom one on, sewn the bottom one on, or you can give that a little press. I'll just press that one that way. And I'm just going to quickly sew this one on the bottom. Now, I wanted these to be a particular size, so I've done them in such a way that you can just tidy the edges up. I've allowed enough fabric. If you want to do them the exact size to start with, that's fine. It makes no difference. It's such a sliver of fabric if you want to tidy it up. Some people prefer to. So initially I used to do it so they come out the exact size, but I found through teaching, people quite often prefer to tidy the edges up and get rid of any stray threads, or if they have pressed it and stretch the fabric in any way, you can still just tidy it up as well then. So again, there's no quilt police around. Nobody knows if you've sewn something really slowly or really fast. It's the finished result and how comfortable you'll feel actually making it. Just going to ease that out. I'm just going to take that one out because I'm going to switch that machine off. Okay, and once again, we've got a really nice join. So I'll just quickly press, oops, might help if I took that thread saver off. I don't think we want that left attached to it. So I'm just going to press that seam away from the center. And to be honest with you, I do like to give my blocks a little press. So if you just want to tidy, thank you, Alexia, tidy these edges up, all you need to do is use your center seam. And I'm actually placing my 4-inch line on there. And if ever anything's not quite square, just use the fabric, put your fingers on the ruler and just manipulate the fabric in the areas you need to make sure it's all level. And I use this technique when I'm actually trimming quilts up on the borders and everything before I actually put the binding on. So that is something that's really worth knowing. So place your ruler, and just to make sure it's all straight, just manipulate your fabric by giving it a little tug, a little bit of pressure on your ruler. There we go. And again, I'm vertical and horizontal. So I'm just taking that little sliver off. That's all it is, but it just means that you're taking off any threads, stray threads that may be there. I'm just going to manipulate that one a little bit. There we go. And the final one. So I've got a label in the middle of this ruler just to indicate that this actually belongs to the sew studio, but it doesn't actually help me see through the ruler. So there we go. Lock that. Okay, so there's the little block that we've just made. I've got a few other blocks here. So if we was to lay it out with the colour here, we could put a white one here, a colour here, and let's put a white one here. So by doing it this way, it would alternate colours all the way through the quilt. Really, really pretty. If you want to turn it around a little bit, what we could do is turn this so that we have the colours actually butting up to each other, which then is going to give you another look, because if we then add this onto here, we would have 4 coloured squares and then 4 white and then 4 colour. So you can see you can still do different layouts. Really, really effective. The other thing, if I put these into a quilt, what I like to do is, for instance, on this one, I would put this fabric on this border and here, and I put this one here and here. And it really highlights and draws out, and it seems to really bring that little checkerboard forward within the block. So that is the tutorial for the disappearing 4 patch. Thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.